Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Uh, Hello. Today we are going to talk about the evolution of global conflict. Before that, we will have a brief discussion on what is conflict and how conflict develop. Okay. Hopefully, this knowledge will be useful for you not only in dealing with international conflict but also your personal conflict. Okay. So, what is conflict? Conflict is not necessarily violent. Yeah. Conflict is not necessarily violent. Conflict happen whenever there is an interaction of independent people who have different or incompatible goals. So there are three I's of conflict. The first is interaction. Yeah, you have to interact with someone or another party in order to be able to uh, have conflict with the other party. Yeah. If you are not interacting with the other party, then you will not have conflict with that party. Okay, so the interaction is required. It's a prerequisite of the conflict. Then the second is interdependence. If you are not interdependent with one another, if you can freely like walk away from the other party, then why do you have to develop conflict? Just leave it. Yeah, leave the other party and drop it, and you will have more peaceful life like that. So, in order for two or more parties to develop a conflict, then they need to be interact with one another and they need to be interdependent with one another. Yeah. So if you are interacting with, for example, you are in a market, then you meet some strangers. Yeah, that means you have interaction. But then, can you have conflict with the strangers? Actually, it depends on whether you are interdependent on the strangers or not. If that strangers move to the north, you move to the west, and your paths are not crossing, then you are not interdependent with one another. Then why should you have conflict with this stranger? But if you are if you are in interaction with the stranger, then you are interdependent. For the example, you are moving through similar ways on the same corridor, and you have incompatible goals. Like one of you go to the north, one the other go to the south, and the corridor is small enough; it can only hold one people at a time. Then you have conflict there. Who will go first, the stranger or you? Okay, so that's the meaning of three I's in conflict. First, you have interaction, you have interdependence, and then you have incompatible goals. There will be no conflict if you don't have incompatible goals. Yeah. For example, if you and your parents absolutely interact with one another and you are interdependent with one another, your parents depend on you and you are also depending to your parents, but then you don't have any incompatible goals. Your parents want you to enroll in UII and then graduate and then perhaps pursue career in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and you have similar goal with your parents, then there is no conflict. But for the example, your parents want you to be a medical doctor, you want to be a diplomat, then you have incompatible goals, then you have conflict with your parents. Okay? So again, in order for two parties to develop conflict among them, they have to interact with one another, they have to interdependent with one another, then they have to have incompatible goals. This is similar whether you are looking at the societal level or at the global level. In international relations, you also have three I's. Yeah, two states or two parties have to interact with one another. Indonesia, for the example, we don't have any conflict with Canada because we almost have no interaction with Canada, right? And then, even though we have interaction with Canada, Do we have any interdependence with Canada? Perhaps not. Yeah. Thus, Indonesia has no conflict with Canada. It's different. If we look at Indonesia and Malaysia, perhaps we have conflict with Malaysia because we interact with Malaysians closer. Yeah, we have interdependence. Like if Malaysia is attacking us, we are in trouble. If we attack Malaysia, they are in trouble. Like that, we need one another. And then we might have incompatible goals. For the example, Indonesia, we want to send our workers to Malaysia, and then like we presume that the workers will be treated well, they will got salary, they'll be happy, and then they come home with all their savings. But in Malaysia, Malaysia wants to minimize the production cost and maximize the profit of the company. So they then give lower than average wages for Indonesia's workers. So we have incompatible goals, and then we have to settle this conflict down. Okay. And then, of course, with the development of technology, especially transportation technology, the three acts of conflict also change. Yeah. For example, when China start to claim the Natuna waters or South China Sea as theirs, then they start to send military ships, carriers, or drones to patrol this water. Then Indonesia and China, suddenly we have interaction, interdependence, and incompatible goals. Yeah, suddenly there is a new conflict between Indonesia and China. Okay, so in order to have conflict, yeah, two parties have to have interaction, interdependence, and incompatible goals. And this is similar whether you look at societal level or at the global level. Okay, and then we look at society level. There are four types of society. Yeah. The first is society without conflict, yeah, or no conflict society. In this society, before incompatible goals develop into confrontation, the member of society manage to solve the differences. Yeah. Then we have surface conflict, yeah, society with surface conflict. In this, the interaction, interdependence, and incompatible goals among the member of society clash. Yeah, each party confront one another, and then conflict arose from that confrontation. But then they managed to deal with the conflict through communication and negotiation. We have next is the latent conflict society. This society at the surface apparently has no type of conflict at all. It's a peaceful, quiet society. But then deep within the psychological mind, the mental or even the feeling of the member of the society, they have deep rooted conflict. It's like root, yeah, going in within the society, but there is no flower buds, no branch, nothing, no sign of the tree at all at the surface. But the root is there. Yeah, this is very different, very dangerous because whenever the root, yeah, uh, found a momentum, then this latent conflict society will explode into a society with open conflict, like in number four. In this society, you have day-to-day conflict, but then whenever you try to solve this day-to-day conflict, you cannot. Why? The conflict will keep on growing, keep on growing, keep on growing, because nobody deal with the root of the conflict. Yeah. For example, racism. Yeah. Why police violence against black people in America, in the United States of America, keep on happening? Because nobody deal with the root of the conflict. They deal with the cases, with the surface cases, but then they do not deal with the root of the conflict. Thus, the conflict keep on going on and on and on and on and on. Okay. Yeah. Now you need to understand that conflict is not equivalent with violence. Yeah. A conflict might be happen without any violence. However, there is a chance that conflict will turn into violence if it goes through this stage. Yeah. The first is a pre-conflict stage when people realize that they have different goals one another. Yeah. When a group of the people realize that another group of the people, another member of the society, have incompatible goals with their own. And this is fine. This is fine. This is normal. Very normal. In almost every society, we have competing incompatible goals. However, when the goal is not deal with it, uh, if this incompatibility is not uh, addressed, then it might lead to confrontation when these two parties confront one another with their different goals. When that happens, then it will have the chance to turn into crisis. Crisis happen whenever the confrontation turn violent. So we have violence here. Yeah, we have violence here, and this violence sometimes is unpredictable. Sometimes unpredictable. Sometimes the trigger of the violent act is something mundane, remeh-temeh in Indonesia. Yeah, it's like the social unrest in Maluku. Yeah, around 90, what was that? 99, 2021. Yeah, yeah, it happened. The trigger of that waves of violence was fighting between two uh, preman. Yeah, but then this fighting like inflamed something deeply rooted within the society. Suddenly, your neighbor is your enemy, like that. Yeah, and then whenever the violence already erupted, then it can become so dangerous to the point that one side try to eradicate, to kill all of their enemies. Yeah. In order to stop that, then we need to deal with the conflict. So we have conflict resolution step, and usually we start from the bottom by introducing mediators. Yeah. Like in the conflict between the government of Indonesia and the Free Aceh movement. Yeah. The conflict like was, it was like around for years, and then it was a very violent conflict. It was very hard to people did not imagine that the conflict will would be able to settle down and to be able to solve peacefully. Yeah, but then there was a willingness from both sides of the parties to communicate, and then we had mediators, yeah, that was perceived neutral by both parties. So the mediators then established communication between the two parties, and then the mediator tried to ask the party to find solution to the problem. Remember that in an open conflict society, the solution needs to address the root of the conflict, not only the day-to-day conflict, not only the surface conflict. And then each conflicting parties have to agree with the solution, and then they enter into formal agreement. Yeah. Is it possible for uh, this process or conflict resolution process to collapse? It is very much possible. Like what we see in Myanmar nowadays. Yeah, they Myanmar had conflict between the civilian and the military for decades, and then it entered a stage of conflict resolution with the election, and then Aung San Suu Kyi was elected as the leader of the civilian government, and so on and so forth. But then, without any rhyme or reason, the military started uh, to stop the conflict the solution process, and then they perform a coup. Yeah. Now, you will see there are five uh, types of conflict communication during conflict. Yeah. The first is indifference, the lower left one. Indifference means that the people, the actor who are involved in the conflict, they deem the conflict unimportant because they have low, yeah, they have low uh, objective in maintaining relationship with the other party, and then they also perceive the conflict as low priority to achieve. Yeah, that's why they are becoming like indifferent. It's whatever you say, I don't care like that. The conflict is not worth my effort, not worth my time. Okay, and then we have the forcing style. Yeah, forcing style happen when the conflicting party have low priority in keeping the relation with the other party, but then they have high expectation to gain something from the conflict. Yeah, in international relations, we can see this from Donald Trump. Whenever Donald Trump enter into conflict with another party, he always force his way. Yeah, why? Because, for example, uh, during the American-Chinese trade war, he perceived that it is not important to maintain good relationship with the Chinese government. On the other hand, he thinks that it is very important that the American government gain something from this trade relationship between America and China. So he forced his term to the Chinese government, and then the Chinese government refused. They have their own term, and then they enter into trade war. Or perhaps on the issues of stopping illegal immigration from Mexico and Southern America. Yeah, Trump did not think that um building relationship with the Mexican government or the Southern American government is important. But on the other hand, he thought that stopping illegal immigration is very important. That's why he forced his own term, and then he tried to build wall separating United States with its southern neighbors. Yeah. On the top, you can see there are two types of communication. The first is giving in. This happens when the conflicting party uh, thinks that it is important to maintain good relation with the other party. At the same time, they think that it is not important to win over the conflict. So they prioritize their relationship with the other party more rather than try to win the conflict. Yeah. Yeah. For example, you can see between Prince Harry and Meghan. Yeah. Like when Meghan asked Harry to move out of the UK, Meghan and Harry were entered into a conflict. Yeah. They were conflicted on whether they should move or not. Harry did not want to move out. Meghan wanted to move out. Yeah, but then yeah, for Harry, um, winning the conflict, moving out or not, is not important. It's of low priority. Maintaining his relationship with Meghan is of high priority. So he then gave in. He agreed to move out to America. And then we have cooperating. Yeah, cooperating is the style of communication when you uh, put high priority in maintaining good relationship with the other party, but at the same time you also expecting yourself, yeah, you expect yourself to win something from this conflict. That you try to cooperate with the other party. Cooperate means like we have I have my problem, you have your problem. Okay, let's make that our problem and settle that together. Yeah. So it's a move to to engage with the problem as our problem and try to settle it down together. It's different with compromise. Compromise is on the middle. Compromise is like we have different objectives. If I move one step, you need to move one step either, and then we will meet at the middle. Yeah. Compromise, making compromise is like when you uh, buy something at the traditional market. Yeah. Perhaps you want to buy X, and then the seller offer you like 1 kilo of X, 50,000, and then you say that's crazy. How about 10,000 for 1 kilos, and then the seller say, okay, I'll put down 40, but then you goes up. Your offer goes up. And then you offer 20,000. The seller say, no, 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 it's 30. Then you say, okay, but 25. And then the seller say, okay, let's do it this way. 30,000 for 1 kilo of egg, but then I will give you extra 2 egg. And then you agree with that. That's compromise. Yeah. It's different with cooperation. Okay. And then about the global conflicts, yeah, according to realism, global conflict is something inevitable because it's the product of anarchy and states are monsters, yeah, leviathans that are power hungry. They will try to maximize their own power, and then inevitably they will clash with one another. That's the cause of international conflict. And in order to maintain peace in international environment, then you have to maintain the balance of power. Yeah, and then you will have security dilemma when a state now, according to liberalism, global conflict is actually the anomaly of international relation. The normal condition of international relation should be peaceful and cooperative international environment. Therefore, the presence of conflict needs to be dealt with, and uh, it's something preventable, yeah, through the usage of international norms and international law. And also, if the conflict escalates, yeah, international organizations should be able to control the behavior of conflicting actors, which are states, and then enforce the international law, therefore preventing the eruption of violent conflict. That's according to liberalism. Now, if we look at the types of global conflict, we can see there are lots of types of global conflict. Yeah, the first is what we call as great power wars. Yeah, great powers war happens whenever a great power within the international relation environment attack another great power, and their violent conflict happen in the great power's territory. Yeah, for the example, we have Great War, the Great War, or World War I and World War II as the example of great powers war. During these wars, Germany, one of the great power at the time, attacked France and then UK and then other great powers, and then war erupted between these great powers within their own territory. And then we have what we call as the hegemonic war. Yeah, hegemonic war happened when a great power tried to stop or invade another great power, but on the territory of third party. For the example, we have Korean War. The Korean War happened not because the people of the Korean state at that time wanted to split their country into two. But Korean War happened because of the interference of the great powers at that time. Yeah. There were rivalries between the United States of America and its ally and the Russian Federation and also the Chinese Communist government. This rivalry result in like meddling of these great powers within another state, in this case, the Korean government. And the result of that is the war amongst the Koreans and then the split of the Korean state into two, the North Korea and the Southern Korea that we know now. So uh, we have the last one is colonial war. This happened when a great power attacked another non-great power country. And you might think that colonial war end with the end of colonialism by 1945. However, uh, we can see that nowadays we still have colonial war if we use this definition. For the example, when the USA attacked Afghanistan and Iraq, these wars our war instigated by great power, in this case USA, and this great power attacked a non-great power, which were Afghanistan and Iraq government. So we can consider this as colonial war. And then intrastate war, war within a state, you can see there is a civil war. Civil war happen when there are two or more conflicting parties seeking to gain political power. For example, we have uh, Myanmar condition nowadays. We have two conflicting parties, the military and the demonstrants. Yeah, and then they have different opinion, and then they are um, competing in gaining political position. Then we have the second type is identity war. Yeah, identity war might involve some kind of political position, but the more prominent cause of the war is different its identity. For example, you can look at the Rwandan uh, war, yeah, between the Hutu and Tutsi, or at the Bosnia-Serbia war. Yeah, uh, in these both wars, yes, there were positions, political positions to be competed. But then violence happened not only toward those who have political aspiration, but toward anyone with different identity. Yeah. For example, in the case of Bosnian Serbian War, the siege of Srebrenica, the massacre of Ihag, Potokari, and other, this the violence happened toward ordinary people simply because they are Muslims, they have different identity than the Serbian and the Croatian, and then they got massacred. Yeah, so in identity war, it might involve different political affiliation and also involve in aspiration to gain political prominence. But the more uh, important or the root cause of the war is the different identity. And then you can use this to explain global conflict. Yeah? There are several levels of analysis that you can use. For the example, you want to explain why, yeah, Iraq attacked Kuwait in 1990. Yeah, why Iraq attacked Kuwait in 1990. Yeah. You can explain this through one or more of this level of analysis. The first, you can analyze on the individual level. For example, you can analyze Iraq attack on Kuwait by explaining the personality of Iraq leader Saddam Hussein. You can say that, well, Saddam Hussein is a bloodthirsty tyrant, warlord, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So you focus your analysis on individual level. Or you can explain and focus your analysis on national level. You can explain Iraq-Kuwait war through the national problem in Iraq. Yeah. So you have Iraq at that time. Uh, Iraq was having difficulties, yeah, economic difficulties. They spent so much on their war toward the Iranian government. However, however, they did not get compensation from the USA and other Middle Eastern government, including Kuwait. So, in order to gain economic compensation, yeah, compensation, they attacked Kuwait. That's how you explain Iraq-Kuwait war from uh, the national or domestic level. Okay, and then the third, you can explain a conflict from a regional level, whether they have bad neighbors or bad neighborhood. Yeah, for example, Iraq-Kuwait can be considered as a bad neighbor to one another. Yeah, Iraq is the bigger one, and Iraq has aspiration to uh, integrate Kuwait into Iraq territory, while Kuwait is the smaller one. But then uh, the, the the Iraqi government at that time accused Kuwait in stealing oil from uh, oil oil well oil well operated by both Iraq and Kuwait. Yeah, so they are bad neighbor and for one another. Or you can then explain in global level, for example, the intervention of the USA, the geopolitics of Middle East, and so on and so forth. That's at the global level. Yeah? So you can use this four level of analysis to explain a global conflict. Okay. Okay. We were talking about the global conflict from the perspective of realism and liberalism, and these two theories consider state as the only uh, global actors. But then we have a new type of global conflict nowadays that we call as transnational conflict. What is transnational conflict? Transnational conflict has one or both of these two characteristics. Yeah. The first is transnational conflict is contesting the traditional image of a geographical scale. In easier words, a transnational conflict wants to change the map. Yeah. So for the example, I previously mentioned on Iraq-Kuwait conflict in 1990s and 1992. This conflict, despite involving lots of country, Iraq, Kuwait, and then you have the United States and its ally like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and so on and so forth. Despite that, despite that, this conflict um, was done within the established geographical border. Iraq is Iraq there. Yeah. The Allied force attacked Iraq, yes, but they did not try to change the border of Iraq. They did not try to change the geographical condition of Iraq. This is different with ISIS. When ISIS came, yeah, they tried to destroy all geographical border known to international society. They want to destroy Syria. They want to destroy Lebanon. They want to destroy Saudi Arabia. They want to destroy Iraq. They want to destroy Turkey. And from this destruction, they were seeking to establish a new political unit with new geographical border. That's why, while Iraq-Kuwait conflict involved global actors and become like multi-state war against Iraq, despite that, this is not a transnational conflict. On the other hand, since ISIS seeks to change the geographical condition of the established international society, then ISIS was a transnational conflict. Okay. Um, for the example, another example is how the Chinese government seeks to change the geographical border, yeah, expanding their influence by claiming the South China Sea as their territory and essentially modifying the border of several other states such as Vietnam, the Philippines, Thailand, South Korea, and Japan. This is a transnational conflict. Okay, so you got the first characteristic that transnational conflict is something a conflict across borders and try to change the geographical condition of current for international society. Then you also have the conflict that involves network across traditional borders. Yeah, so you can have actor network, idea, fund, guns, and so on and so forth. And usually this network overlap with one another. So you can look at uh, the drug cartel in Latin America. The, the struggle against drug cartel is a transnational conflict since drug cartels do not respect state boundaries. Yeah? A drug cartel might operate in two different states, and at the same time, a state might be infested by more than one drug cartel. Thus, the struggle against drug cartel is something changing the geographical establishment of our international society. Thus, it can be categorized as transnational conflict. So, according to Marxism, global conflict is something inevitable, yeah, as long as economic gap between the proletariat class and the capitalist class exists. The capitalist class will exploit the international system in order to subjugate, to make the proletariat class within their command. Yeah, so that is the nature of global conflict, something created by the global capitalist class in order to um, subjugate the global proletariat class. While according to constructivism, global conflict is the reflection of different interests within our world, and these different interests are rooted, yeah, are stem from different identities. Therefore, according to constructivism, efforts to deal with these different interests will result in uh, the 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 decreasing of global conflict. Yeah, you can see that um, the European Union, yeah, is an establishment based on communication among various interests in the Europe, and it succeeds because it can create a new European identity that is surpassing national identity. And when you see Brexit, yeah, you will see that during the Brexit campaign, it was not the European Union's policy that was being attacked, but uh, the sense or identity of being European that was being attacked as well. So, according to constructivists, conflict will happen if several conflicting parties have their own interests and these interests clash with one another. And this clash of interest is what like that is founded upon different identity. If you can deal with these different identities, then you will lessen the intensity of the conflict. Example, AU. Yeah. And another example, a failed one, perhaps, is the League of Arab States. Yeah, League of Arab States is a regional organization in the Middle East, and it seeks to uh, engage and deal with conflicts among Arab states. But since it failed in creating a sense of unified Arabs, then it also failed in its conflict resolution attempt. Okay, so that will be all for today's explanation. So you have the definition of conflict, the three I's of conflict, how conflict can turn into violence, and how to uh, de-escalate violence and try to resolve the conflict. Yeah, and then you have also several approach, communication approach to conflict, whether you are forcing or compromising and so on and so forth. And then you will also have the several theories of international relation perspective on global conflict. Yeah. And also you now understand there are several level of analysis that you can use to analyze global conflict, be that individual level, national level, regional level, or global level. Okay. So now for your second review, please use one or more. Yeah, use one or more of the level of analysis to explain the conflict in the Natuna waters. Yeah, you can use one or more. Okay. If you have any question, please hit me on Telegram or send me email. And see you next week, inshallah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.